Hi, welcome to Simple English for Life. Are you ready to improve your English? Here, we learn through stories, slow, clear, and fun. Just listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
1. Introduction. This story is about two very big countries, the United States, also called the US, and China. They have the two biggest economies in the world. They buy and sell a lot of things from each other. This is called trade. For a long time, trade between the US and China kept growing. But after a while, problems started. The way they traded began to change. The U.S. government decided it wanted new rules for trade. At that time, the U.S. president was Donald Trump. He had a plan called America First. He wanted to support businesses and workers inside the U.S. One way to do this was by using something called tariffs. Tariffs are special taxes on goods from other countries. When a country adds a tariff, the product becomes more expensive. The U.S. government put new tariffs on many Chinese goods. They hoped Americans would buy more American-made products instead. They also wanted China to change some of its trade practices. But China didn't agree. China thought the new tariffs were unfair. So, China fought back. They put their own tariffs on goods from the U.S. When one country answers tariffs with more tariffs, it's called retaliation. It's like a trade fight using taxes. Over time, both sides added more and more tariffs. People started calling it a trade war. Trade wars can make business harder and everyday things more expensive. This story will explain how this trade war started, how it grew, and how it affects people and businesses, not just in the US and China, but around the world. 2. New rules for trade. The U.S. said China was not playing fair. The U.S. government gave three main reasons. First, China made it hard for U.S. companies to do business in China. For example, U.S. companies often had to share their technology with Chinese companies. Sometimes, they even had to give away important business secrets just to stay in the market. Second, the U.S. said China gave a lot of help or support to its own companies. This made it harder for American companies to compete. Third, the U.S. pointed to a big gap in trade. The U.S. bought a lot more from China than China bought from the U.S. This is called a trade deficit. The U.S. wanted to change that. They wanted to sell more American products to China and buy less from China. Because of these problems, the U.S. started using tariffs. They put taxes on Chinese goods to make them more expensive. The idea was, if Chinese products cost more, Americans might buy fewer of them. At the same time, they might buy more goods made in America. The U.S. also hoped that these tariffs would pressure China to change its rules. They wanted fairer treatment for U.S. companies and a better balance in trade. 3. China responds. When the U.S. started putting tariffs on goods from China, China didn't just sit back and do nothing. They decided to fight back. The Chinese government didn't think the U.S. taxes were fair, so they responded by adding their own tariffs on American goods. This move is called retaliation, which means they were paying back the U.S. for what it had done. For example, when the U.S. raised taxes on Chinese products, China responded by raising taxes on American products like soybeans, cars, and airplanes. This made things even more tense. China was sending a message. If the U.S. was going to use tariffs, China would do the same. This made the trade war even bigger and harder to solve. In the end, the tariffs kept getting higher on both sides. Each country was trying to hurt the other's economy, but neither one was willing to back down. This created a cycle of escalating tensions. China also made it clear that it didn't want a trade war. They said it was unfair and that nobody would win, but they were also prepared to defend their interests. 4. Tariff escalation. The trade war between the U.S. and China didn't cool down after the first round of tariffs. Instead, tensions kept rising and the tariffs got even tougher. For example, the U.S. increased tariffs on Chinese products to 145%, while China responded with tariffs of up to 125% on U.S. goods. At this point, the fight had expanded beyond just a few industries. It was hitting a wide range of sectors: textiles, electronics, chemicals, machinery, you name it. This escalation made things harder for businesses and consumers alike. Companies faced higher costs, and shoppers started feeling the pinch with rising prices. Many U.S. businesses and industry groups spoke out, urging the government to stop adding tariffs. They warned that the strategy wasn't just hurting China, it was hurting America too. But the Trump administration stayed firm. They believed that putting pressure on China was necessary to force real changes. 5. Important goods. Not all goods were treated the same during the trade war. Some products were considered too important or sensitive to hit with tariffs. For example, the U.S. avoided placing tariffs on popular consumer items like smartphones and laptops, at least at first. Why? Because adding tariffs to those products would have made them a lot more expensive for American shoppers, and that could cause major public backlash. China, on its side, also carefully chose which American goods to target. It focused on products like soybeans, beef, and pork, key exports from U.S. farmers. This was a smart move by China. By targeting agriculture, they put pressure directly on President Trump's political base, rural states that heavily supported him. Both sides were trying to hurt the other, but without causing too much pain at home. It was like a complicated game of chess, with every move carefully calculated. 6. Impact on businesses and consumers. The trade war didn't just affect governments. It hit regular businesses and consumers too. For companies that relied on goods from China, costs went up fast. Some had to raise their prices. Others tried to find new suppliers outside of China, but that wasn't easy or cheap. Big companies like Apple and Walmart spoke out, warning that tariffs would eventually lead to higher prices for customers. And they were right. Many everyday products, from washing machines to shoes, got more expensive. Some small businesses really struggled to absorb the higher costs. On the Chinese side, exporters faced their own problems. Some factories saw fewer orders from the U.S., and workers lost jobs as a result. At the end of the day, the trade war created a lot of uncertainty. And in business, uncertainty often means trouble. 7. Global impact. The trade war between the U.S. and China has affected not just these two countries, but the whole world. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, says that if the trade problems keep going, the world's economy could grow 7% slower. Because of the trade restrictions and supply chain problems, many countries are looking for new markets and suppliers. Countries like Vietnam and Mexico are seeing more trade as companies try to find other places to do business and reduce their reliance on the U.S. and China. 8. What happens next? The future of the trade relationship between the U.S. and China is still uncertain. Right now, both sides are trying to figure out the best way forward. The Phase 1 deal gave a little relief, but the big issues still remain unresolved. What could happen next? Well, it depends on a lot of factors. The U.S. could decide to keep pushing for even more changes, especially with China's policies on technology and intellectual property. On the other hand, both countries might find a way to negotiate a new deal, one that could help avoid more tariffs and restore stability to their trade. But here's the thing. The trade war showed how important it is to be careful about who you depend on for things like technology, materials, and manufacturing. Both countries will likely continue to rethink their supply chains and try to become less reliant on each other. This could change the way businesses around the world operate. One thing is clear. The trade relationship between the U.S. and China will continue to have a huge impact not only on the two countries, but on the rest of the world too. So, we'll all be watching closely to see what happens next.